The Human Founder Podcast by Gali Bloch-Liran.
Hi, I'm Gali Bloch-Liran, and welcome to The Human Founder, the podcast where we speak about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Entrepreneurs often describe the emotional roller coaster that is embedded in being an entrepreneur or investor. We experience the lowest of lows and highest of highs. And it's from that place of uncertainty, the need to constantly self-manage ourselves, keep up our energy and be mentally resilient in order to deal with everything. Well, it's not easy. In each episode, I will be talking to entrepreneurs, investors, psychologists, being their sounding board, with the goal of creating a space for this less spoken about layer, which is the mental aspect accompanying the entrepreneurial journey. I will also share tips and tricks to help boost your focus, clarity, and mental resilience. And today I have a very big pleasure speaking with Nir Eyal. So hi, Nir. It's really, really great to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be with you.
I'll introduce you for our audience. Nir, you're a writer, consultant, and teacher of the intersection of psychology, technology, and business. You taught marketing at Stanford Graduate School of Business and the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford. Since 2003, you co-founded and sold 2 tech companies and was dubbed by the MIT Technology Review as the prophet of habit-forming technology. That's huge. You're the author of 2 best-selling books, Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products, and Indistinctable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life, which was named one of the best business and leadership books by Amazon. Many achievements. In addition to blogging at nirandfar.com, your writing has been featured in the New York Times, the Harvard Business Review, Time Magazine, and Psychology Today. And among all of that, you're also an investor in habit-forming products that improves users' life, like we all know them, Eventbrite and Anchor.fm, which was acquired by Spotify, and Kahoot, and Kanban, we're going to talk about it, Product Hunt, and many, many more. So thanks again for joining me. It's really, really great.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
And, I thought about what we're going to talk because we have so many things to discuss about you being an investor and you being a prophet in productivity and effectivity, and maybe take us back a little bit to your where you began in time and like how your childhood and how your journey actually brought you to where you are today. Let's begin with that.
Sure. So yeah, I was born in Israel. So I'm a Sabra, but my family immigrated to the United States when I was 3 years old in 1981. And so I grew up in Central Florida. So I feel much more culturally American, but when I'm in America, I feel like I'm an Israeli. When I'm in Israel, I feel like I'm an American, but I came back and forth between those 2 places. So every summer I would come back and visit my family in Israel. I still speak Hebrew, but speak like a 3-year-old still. So we spoke it at home, but it's my first language, but I'm much more proficient in English, barely proficient, but proficient enough in English. And yeah, what else can I tell you?
So tell me, how did you get to this point where you're actually teaching other people about productivity and about how to master their time and how to manage themselves in the best possible way? What led you to this direction, actually?
So specifically, the research I've done around personal productivity and distraction came when there was a specific moment in my life. I was with my daughter one afternoon, and we had this perfect day planned, just some daddy-daughter time. And I remember we had this activity book full of different things that dads and daughters could do together. And one of the things in this book was to ask each other this question: if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember the question verbatim, but I can't tell you what my daughter said, because in that moment, for whatever reason, I thought it was a good time to just check my phone real quick and do this one thing. And by the time I looked up from my device, she was gone, because I was sending a very clear signal that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was, that she went to go play with some toy outside. And so that's when I realized I really had to reassess my relationship with distraction, because I'll be honest with you, it wasn't just with my daughter. It would happen when I would say I was going to exercise, but I didn't, or I was going to eat right, but I wouldn't. It would happen when I would say, oh, I'm definitely going to sit down at my desk and I'm going to get to work and I'm going to work on this big, important project. And yet 30, 45 minutes later, I was doing everything but the thing I said I was going to do at my job. And so that's when I really decided that if I could have any superpower, I would want the power to be indistractable, because I think being indistractable will be the skill of the century. There is no area of your life that doesn't depend upon your ability to control your attention, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, your relationships, your job. All of these things require you to control your attention. This is truly how we choose our life. And so I spent the next 5 years researching and writing about how to become indistractable. Why did the book take me so long? Because I kept getting distracted. I wrote the book for me more than anyone else. I needed this book. And so I really wanted to dive into the psychology literature to really understand. What's that?
You actually wrote it to yourself.
Yes. I mean, it's great that the book has sold over 500,000 copies and that people are enjoying it. It's been published in 40 languages. Wonderful. But I'll be honest with you, I wrote it for me because I looked for books to help me with this problem. And all the books kind of said the same thing, right? Get rid of your cell phone. It's technology's fault. Well, that's really nice. You know, some professor can tell me to stop using social media because they're tenured, you know, they have a tenured job at a university. And so they don't need to use social media. But for the rest of us, you can't stop using email. You can't stop using social media. We rely upon these things for our jobs, many of us. And why would we want to? These are wonderful, beautiful tools. And so what I wanted to do is to provide a tech positive approach that doesn't moralize, that doesn't medicalize the problem, but deals with it in a rational, scientific methodology by going deeper than just the blaming and the shaming, and actually looks at the root cause of why we get distracted in the first place.
So that's a beautiful point. And, you know, working with so many founders, both yourself and me, this is one of the major challenges that they are dealing all the time, because the investors need something, the clients need something, the team needs something, the spouse needs something, the founders need something. And this is really like the superpower that you need to learn how to be better in performing it, like to be indistractable. So you said something about the blame and the shame, this is like the automat. This is the first thing that we actually absorbing from it. It's like we're feeling blame about it and we're feeling the shame. So what were the main learnings, the mental ones, the inner ones that your actually journey and research brought to your understanding about it?
Yeah. So one of the big learnings is that people tend to separate themselves into two categories when it comes to distraction. We have the blamers. The blamers are the ones that blame things outside themselves. It's the technology, it's my boss, it's my kids, it's the news, it's Twitter, it's all this stuff outside of me. Those tend to be the blamers. Now, of course, that strategy is useless because there's always going to be distraction. We know that the philosopher Plato talked about this problem 2,500 years ago. The internet and social media did not create this problem. People have been distracted since time immemorial. I mean, literally for 2,500 years, people have been complaining about how distracting the world is. So that can't be the solution. We're not going to hop into a time machine before some, mythical time before distraction existed. It always existed. And the other side of the coin are people who are shamers. Shamers, they don't blame the things outside themselves. They shame themselves. They think that they're somehow at fault. They're the problem. I have a short attention span. I have an addictive personality. Maybe I have undiagnosed ADHD. There must be something broken about me. And that's almost never the case. Now, some people really do have ADHD. It's about 3% of the population, but that means that there's a 97% chance that's not you. And the vast majority of people don't have anything wrong with them. And so the right approach is, and the reason, by the way, this tactic of shaming yourself is so harmful, because that shame is a very uncomfortable sensation. And so this is, I used to be clinically obese as a kid. And so this is very analogous to what I used to do with food, that the cycle of shame led me down some very dark places, because nobody likes to feel shame. And so what do you do when you feel shame? You're likely to use distractions to take your mind off of that uncomfortable sensation. Right. So when you feel shame, you're likely to give into more and more distraction with it, which of course defeats the whole purpose. So we don't want to be a blamer. We don't want to be a shamer. We want to be what's called a claimer. A claimer claims responsibility, not for how they feel. This is a very important lesson I learned, that you cannot control your emotions. Many people say, calm down, take care of your emotions, stop feeling the way you feel. You cannot control your emotions. You can't control your urges any more than you can control the urge to sneeze. When you feel the urge to sneeze, it's too late. You already felt it, right? You can't control the urge to sneeze. The only thing you can control is what you will do in response to that urge, in response to that uncomfortable sensation, hence the term responsibility. So when you feel the urge to sneeze, do you sneeze all over everyone and get them sick? No, you take out a handkerchief, you cover your face, because that's the responsible thing to do. So the same goes with all these urges, all these temptations to give into distraction. It's not about the feeling itself, it's how you will respond to that sensation that matters.
So I totally get it. And it's also, it relates to our focus, whether or not we're focusing on the external surrounding and blaming the external surrounding, or take responsibility and look inside towards us and focus our ability to behave on the inside to create the impact there. But there is a very big gap as someone who's really tried to get the responsibility on myself. I'm accountable to what I do. There's a gap between wanting to possess this accountability and this ability to own the things that happen, and then what happens in the right moment, in the exact moment when you really need to respond. Because as you said, we cannot control our feelings, and sometimes it's too difficult, like to create this new ritual, to create this new response, to behave differently. And as consciousness as will be, and as smart as will be, and trained as will be, this is where there's a gap between what you want to do in the inside and how you actually behave. So how do you suggest to solve it?
Right. So as Viktor Frankl said, the great psychologist, said that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And so what we're doing is cultivating that space, that we are not robots. We are not automatons. Our brains are not being hijacked by these technologies. And in fact, the idea that we are not responsible for our own behavior, the idea that technology is doing it to us, is actually incredibly unhelpful and actively harmful to people. And that's what I'm really at war against, is this popular narrative that is portrayed in the media, which, by the way, they do that because they are in competition with new media. The reason you constantly hear in the newspapers and on television about how terrible social media is because it's the direct competition. Exactly. They all want your attention. All media monetizes your attention. I don't care if it's books, movies, podcasts, television, social media, it's all for the war of attention. But there's nothing wrong with any of this, right? So that's why we need to stop moralizing these behaviors. Anything you want to do with your time and attention is fine, as long as you do it according to your values and your schedule, not someone else's. And so this might be a good opportunity to start from really fundamentals to understand what is distraction really. Most people will tell you that the opposite of distraction is focus, but that's not true. That's not exactly right. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. Think about it, traction and distraction. Both words come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull, and they both end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action, reminding us that distraction is something that happens, an action that we take, not something that happens to us. It's an action we take. So traction.
Our responsibility.
Exactly.
The process.
That's right. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things that move you closer to your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite of traction, distraction, is any action that pulls you further away from what you said you were going to do, further away from your goals, further away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So this is very, very important, because I would argue that any action can be traction or distraction based on one word. And that one word is forethought. As Dorothy Parker said, the time you plan to waste is not wasted time. So there's nothing wrong with going on social media. There's nothing wrong with watching YouTube videos. There's nothing wrong with playing video games, as long as you do it on your schedule. Okay, then it becomes traction, not distraction. Conversely, the worst kind of distraction, when people think of distraction, they think about, video games, they think about Facebook, they think about these things as distractions. But it turns out the worst kind of distraction are actually work-related tasks. How can that be? Because if what you are doing is not what you said you would, it's by definition a distraction. So let me give an example. For years, I would sit down at my desk and I would say, okay, I've got to focus on that most important task. I'm going to do that thing that I've been putting off, the thing I've been procrastinating on. Here I go. I'm going to get started right now. But let me check email for a few minutes, right? Let me just scroll Slack for a second. That's a work-related task. Let me just clean up my desk just to get organized real quick. Those are all things I have to do, right?
Take your
attention. What I didn't realize
on specific things that you want to do at the same moment.
Exactly. And that's how distraction tricks you into prioritizing the urgent and the easy work at the expense of the hard and important work you have to do to move your life and career
the part
forward.
Of us wants to check mark a V and to feel good.
That's right.
something, because this is an immediate gain that
reward.
we can
Yeah,
but reward, exactly.
exactly.
But once we take this immediate reward or gain, we actually postpone making ourselves closer to the bigger thing that we want to do. And hence, what I really like about what you're saying, and we see it with founders and investors all the time, is how important it is to be able to prioritize what you want to do, what you need to do. Everything is based on your values, on the strategy that you want now for the product, for the service, for the VC, for whatever it is, because that will create the right way to approach the various tasks and the projects that you have. And one of the tools that I like the most, and I really used a lot also to myself, but to the founders I coach as well, is the Eisenhower metrics, which you actually can see what's important, what's urgent, what you can delegate, what you can delete. And this is really helpful, for yourself to prioritize the things that you do. And what I want to emphasize here, that it's not a question of how you manage your schedule or what you put in the schedule. It's a matter of how accurate you are with yourself, with your inner self, and how attuned you are to what you really want to do, and you're not chasing after other things. And this requires a lot of inner attention in order to succeed in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so prioritizing becomes incredibly important. And so the Eisenhower matrix is a good first step. To-do lists are a good first step, but fundamentally what you have to do is force yourself to prioritize. It's only when you use a time box schedule, and this is what I describe in my book, Indistractable, because the reason to-do lists suck. To-do lists are a horrible productivity tool because to-do lists have no constraints. It's kind of the same with the Eisenhower matrix too. Eventually it's like, okay, what do I need to do? Okay, yes, you're right. I need to delegate this. I need to delete that. But most entrepreneurs have a million things they need to do. And the reason that using just a to-do list, as opposed to the methodology I talk about in my book, Indistractable, is that without a time box calendar, without planning out when you are going to do these things, using a to-do list is actually actively counterproductive. Because what happens is, day after day, you have no constraints. And so you have this growing list of stuff and no forcing function to make you prioritize it. Whereas when you have a time box calendar, you have to do trade-offs, right? Because everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. So, but to become indistractable, you have to turn your values into time. You have to actually put that time on your schedule, or the things aren't going to get done, or you're going to run yourself ragged.
I really like the sentence that you said, you have to transform your values into time, because once you organize your schedule, and I take a lot of time to organize my schedule perfectly, and also with my founders, because then what actually happens in your mind is the negotiation with yourself. Is it important for me? How much time am I going to allocate to it? What is more important? How do I want to schedule my day, my week, my month? And then later on, you don't need to negotiate anymore. You just need to be flexible and agile to see if things are changing. But the basics of it is there. And I remember that when we tried to schedule this conversation, you sent me, I don't remember the name of the startup, but some machine learning, like AI tool to do it. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm a mother for 3 children. I have dozens of founders that I'm working with. I'm lecturing, I'm writing book, I'm doing podcasts. There's no way that there can be an AI smart calendar that can really understand all the sequences and all the considerations and everything that is in my mind. And I don't know how to delegate it to external things. So I'm still badging my time and doing it, but maybe, I don't know, maybe you have less components in your life currently, so it works for you.
No, I'm a father, and I've got a lot of things going on as well. And the idea here is to be a scientist, not a drill sergeant. The idea is not to say, okay, I set my schedule and that's it. It's going to be the schedule forever and ever. The idea is that you make changes in advance. Okay, never in the day of. That's a big mistake. You never change it in the day, but the day before, the week before. Of course, what you want to do is be a scientist. What does a scientist do? A scientist makes a hypothesis, runs an experiment, and then looks at the results, and then repeats the whole cycle over again. So what I want people to do, what I do every single week, is that I have time in my schedule to look at my schedule for the week ahead and make adjustments. Of course, this becomes easier and easier. Now this takes me maybe 10 minutes a week. But what I'm doing is I'm looking at the calendar for the week ahead, and I'm asking myself, what are my values and how do I turn my values into time? And so this is where I explain in the book about these 3 life domains. You've got you, your relationships, and finally your work. So it starts with you. You're at the center of these three life domains. If you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people, you can't make the world a better place. So what I want you to do first thing is when you look at that calendar for the week, ask yourself, do I have enough time to live out my values of taking care of myself? Now, I'm not going to tell you what your values should be. That's up to you. What I want to invite you to do is to whatever it is that you yourself want to do, make sure you put that time in your calendar. So for example, sleep. Right? We all know how important sleep is for our health. If you have children, you tell your children you have to have a bedtime. But do you have a bedtime? Right? We need a bedtime as adults too, because sleep is incredibly important for your physical and psychological health. Exercise, if that's important to you. I'm not saying it should be. It's up to you, your values. But if you think, people say, what are your values? Oh, bliut, health. That's the most important thing. Okay, but is it in your calendar? Do you make time for it, or is it something you'll get to when you get to? And you know what happens? You don't get to it. What about learning? What about reading? What about playing video games? If you enjoy playing video games, if you like going on social media, whatever it is you want to do it. I want you to do it, but put it in your schedule. Then the relationships, we need to have time in our plate.
I want to interrupt for a second. I totally agree. And I behave that way. But what I find out, and I'm sure that you're aware of it as well, that especially founders, entrepreneurs, they're so busy and there's so much stress on their shoulders, so many things they need to handle. They can't understand it, this thing that is so clearly and clear to you and to me, and that we need to take care of ourselves, our you, in order later on to continue in our circles. They just cannot accept it until something happens. And then they get, they come back and they understand. But they always think about it, that if they'll put some time now to practice or to go to a beer with a friend or even to sleep more than 4 hours a night, it's a waste of time for them. And it's really difficult for them, not for all of them, for some of them, especially the younger ones or those that just began now in their entrepreneurial journey, to understand the trade-off that if they want to do it, simply all the other layers won't be able to be alive, to be valid. So what would be the advice that you would give to people who are less trained in doing these time boxes and put actually a value, take the values to what they need to do?
Yeah, I would say, look, unsolicited advice almost never works. So you can tell somebody, hey, it's really important you get enough sleep. That's typically giving them advice doesn't work. What I would recommend is to help people do the things they themselves want to do. If you're starting a company, your values might be 99% running the company and 1% everything else. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, right? That probably should be that proportion, because starting a business is really, really hard. Okay. But what I want people to do is to not look back and regret. That's what I fear most. That's what I want to help people avoid, is to look back and say, you know what? I could have started a company, but I didn't because I was scrolling Facebook and Instagram too much. You know what? I could have spent more time with my kids. I could have built a great relationship with my wife or husband or whoever, but I didn't because I was doing this other stuff that I now regret doing. So that's what I want to help people prevent. So the right thing to do for certain people in certain times of their life is to go 100% and really focus on whatever project is important to them. But I want people to do that with forethought, okay, in advance, that, yep, that's how I want to spend my life right now, so that they don't regret it later on. Now, also part of the process of becoming indistractable, as I mentioned, is being a scientist, is experimenting, is saying, hey, you know what? When I get 4 hours of sleep, how do I feel the next day? What is my work output like? How good am I at maintaining my focus and attention? What you might find is that it becomes more difficult if you don't get enough sleep, if you don't get enough exercise, if you don't eat the right foods. You might find that your tank will kind of diminish and you won't be as productive. But I think that comes through trial and error, which is totally fine. You can change your schedule. But again, don't do it the day of, do it in advance. Any way you want to spend your time is fine, as long as it's defined in advance.
So that's great. And about the forethought, I like to give them this tool of speak for a second with your future you and ask him, how from a month, a year, 10 years, he would look back to where you are today and what would be the advice that he would give you. And that's really helpful. And about being a scientist, is actually all the time optimizing our operating system and learning it and learning how to make it better. So that was the first thing, the you. Then you have the relationships and the work.
Right. So then comes relationships. So this is where we book time for our friends, for our family, for our community, making sure that we have time to connect with our loved ones. That's the second life domain. So whether it's booking time with, your children, your spouse, your parents, who are your friends, make that time in your schedule, hold it sacred. And then the third life domain is your work. And so this is where most people start, but I think it's actually should be the last category. And here you need to subdivide work into two types of work. The first type of work is called reactive work. Reactive work is when we spend our time reacting to things, right? Reacting to emails, reacting to messages, reacting to meetings, reacting to things. The other type of work is called reflective work. Reflective work is the kind of work that can only be done without distraction. And what we find across the board in every industry is that high performers make time in their day for reflective work. Time to be creative, time to think, time to plan. That can only be done without distraction. So you must hold at least some part in your day. It could be 15 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, it could be an hour, it doesn't matter. You've got to hold some time in your day for reflective work. And it sounds easy. Oh yeah, I'll get time to be creative. I'll get time to think. I'll get time to plan. But if you don't make that time, it won't happen. Why? Because we tend to default to reactive work because it's psychologically easy. It's hard to sit for a minute and say, wait a minute, am I really working on the right stuff? Is this aligned with my strategy? As opposed to what most people do is, I don't know what to do right now. Let me check email. I'm not really sure what's going on. Let me check WhatsApp. What's my priorities? I'm not really sure. I'll go Slack. I'll go check Slack. And that's a huge, huge mistake. So instead of spending your whole day doing reactive work, and I see a lot of entrepreneurs doing this, they feel that all day they're putting out fires. And what tends to happen is that these people are running real fast in the wrong direction because they haven't made time for reflective work.
They think that they are being productive, but they're actually not being effective because the fact that you're doing
exactly.
not exactly in the right direction, that just creates burnout. And I remember also myself being younger, less experienced, feeling that all the time I need to do things, because then you feel the void. So you're busy, right? But you're not doing it with the right things. And I remember last week, for example, I did this exercise. I have these notebooks where I write things, the ongoing, and I finished it and I always put it on the table. And like 2 months after, I go and see what was there. I'm checking I'm optimizing my own machine learning to see my insights there and the AI that happens there. And it came out, it popped up so easily, the insights that, you put too much energy on this effort and this direction more than the right one. And it's really clear to you. And this was a good thing to do. And this reflection, this allocating the time to the reflection during the day, which also comes a lot from mindfulness practice, the way that you learn how to be in the being, in the presence, to absorb everything that happens. And later on, you put it in work, mindfulness at work. So this reflection, it's not just a waste of time. It gives you so many insights about yourself, about your relationships, about the processes that you're doing. And I think it's really a higher level of consciousness and understanding. And it really creates amazing things within teams, within founders, and even, and most important, with ourselves, because it allows us to optimize our own operating system. So that's amazing. I want to take you to another thing for a second about your hat as an investor. How do you know to be in the right place, in the right companies, in the right time for amazing companies? And I'll focus on a Canva, which I found like 4 years ago, I think, really in the beginning. And I loved it. And I just started, I automatically were a premium user. And it's like someone invented something that I'm in love with, and it really, it thinks about all my next moves, etc., and it's amazing. So tell me a little bit from your perspective, both as someone who really works with productivity hacks and a lecturer coming from the marketing world, but also as an investor and advisor who works with Melanie, for example. Tell me a little bit about this experience.
Yeah, so we've been talking about my second book, Indistractable. By the way, I don't remember the title. Do you remember the title in Hebrew? How to say it in Hebrew? The new one? It just was published last month in Hebrew. But anyway, so that was my second book. My first book was called Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products, which was not published in Hebrew yet. Hopefully it will be. But that book is about how do you build the kind of products and services.
Because it's practice your English. It's better to read it in English. Really?
Yeah, I think that's what happened. Most people in tech, that are in Israel are great at reading English. So that's why nobody was interested in publishing it in Hebrew. But anyway, with Hooked, that has been the catalyst for inbound interest in me as an investor. So I only invest in companies that used my hook methodology, because that's where I can offer value, right? I don't really know anything about cybersecurity. I don't really have much insight into pharmaceutical products. I'm not a Web3 guru. I don't know. I can't add much value. So all I can give you is money, which, you can find money in a lot of
You
places
can
these days.
add value
But what
to what your values are. This is exactly it.
That's right. That's
It's
right. So that's
exactly
one thing. So I judge products only in terms of which ones I want to invest in as an angel investor, solely based on this hooked model as an evaluative criteria. Of course, I look at all the standard stuff like, total addressable market and team and all that stuff too. But where I think I can offer value is in the early days of an idea. I can look at it and say, wow, that's got a lot of habit forming potential. And I think I can help the team build that consumer habit. And so I've worked in consumer web, products like Canva. I've worked in enterprise products, SaaS products, healthcare products, education products like Kahoot, you mentioned earlier. And so that's really been my competitive advantage as an investor. And then the way I find deals, I don't do any outbound. I only do, have inbound, but most of my inbound deal flow comes from the fact that I do office hours every week. Anybody who wants to call me can go to my website. They can schedule time with me, and they can book a call for 15 minutes. What's that?
There's a long lineup. It takes time, but it happens.
It takes some time. It takes some time, but it's free. It doesn't cost a dime. So, if you're in a hurry, then I do consulting work. But if you're not in a hurry, then you might have to wait a little bit in line. But then companies will call me, and I do about 200 calls a year. And out of that, I get a few companies that I say, wow, that's how I found Kahoot. The founder, Johan, called me up and said, hey, look, I read your book, and here's how I want to apply your hook model. And he'd done his homework. He really did read it and digested it. And the more I looked into the product, I said, wow, this is really interesting. Can I be involved somehow? And so I invested in the company. With Canva, I met with Melanie in Palo Alto back when I lived there and taught at Stanford. And she'd read the book, and we sat down together at a burger place and talked about her hook model. And I was lucky enough to be involved.
That's amazing. I want to take it to another level. How beautiful it is that you come, based on your values with your methodology about hook, for example, and then you gain around you people who are like-minded in the way they think in the university or other places. And then you generate, these network effects that later on also create deal flow, and later on investments. And then later on you help build products that will bring this impact and this value also to the mass. And it's really beautiful to see this value chain, how everything is connected to the other, and it's growing. It starts from here and it's growing. It's really, really beautiful to see it. So that's great. So you work closely with them, or it's mainly in the early stages?
So usually I will work with a company. Typically, I'll start working with them on a consulting basis. Not that I make a lot of money on the consulting. I mean, I do charge a high fee, but mostly I charge that fee so that they take me seriously, right? So that I can filter out how serious people are. And so typically I'll start working with them for a few hours on a consulting basis. And sometimes it ends there. I give them some advice. They pay me by the hour, like a lawyer. You pay a lawyer a high fee so that they can prevent you from making big, costly mistakes. Most of the time, that's where it ends. Once in a while, I say, you know what, guys, this was a great experience for me. I love the way the team interacts. I've loved working with you. What do you think if I take that consulting fee and I give it back to you, but this time I want equity. And so then they have me whenever they need me. And so they can call me at any time, time boxed, of course, but I make special time for them in case they need, additional advice, assistance, anything I can do to help them.
In the other calendar.
Exactly.
So do you work today? Do you create some kind of VC yourself, or just as an angel investor?
Yeah, I've considered creating a fund of my own, but I never have. I don't really want LPs. I don't want to ask for money from people.
It's another thing about, I mean, I so relate to what you're saying, because it's another way of knowing yourself, knowing your values, knowing how you like to work, knowing that you like to make the decisions for yourself and not be told by others how to navigate the things, because you learn how to trust your values and your machine learning and, your decision-making processes.
Totally. And it's a different skill set, right? Knowing how to build product is a very different skill set, and knowing how to find great products that have a lot of potential is a different skill set from knowing how to raise money from rich foundations and family offices. It's a skill set I don't have, and I don't really feel inspired to go learn how to raise money. So until now, I want to focus on what I'm really good at, which is finding these companies, helping them grow and build consumer habits. And I just use my own money. And yeah, I could probably make more money as a venture capitalist, but what I really care about is making the products better, increasing the reach and impact of the products that I invest in to help make people's lives better, our users' lives better. And so that's what I'm focused on.
And I want to take this last sentence that you said to reflect on it, that it's so beautiful that, again, you're so connected to who you are, to your strength, to your abilities, to your values, that, yeah, the grass is always greener and you can always have more money and you can have more respect and you can do other things. But then you go to sleep at night and you ask yourself, okay, although I'm here and I'm famous and I wrote a couple of books and I'm a best-selling author, what do I want to do? What makes me happy? Right. And I see it with lots of founders, mainly in tech, but not just. And sometimes this pursuit of being bigger, larger, smarter, a richer with money makes them confused of who they are and what do they really want. And as you grow in the road and you're more successful, etc., you've done a few startups already, you wrote several books, the expectations are so high, and it's sometimes very difficult, to listen clearly and loudly to this inner voice that tells you, listen, but this is what's right for you. Of course you can do other things, but you have to choose.
Okay, now you're freaking me out. Now I'm getting self-conscious.
It's too much.
There's that quote that I'm butchering it a little bit because I don't remember it word for word, but something to the effect of envy is the enemy of happiness. Mm-hmm. That envy is the enemy of happiness, right? Seeing what the other person has, right? Coveting thy neighbor's wife. There's a reason that's in the 10 Commandments. Mm-hmm. It destroys your happiness, right? Because when you compare yourself to what other people have and what the other people do and who other people are, it destroys your gratitude for what you have. There's a wonderful experiment that was done at Emory University by a primatologist by the name of Eyal. And he had this beautiful study. It's one of my favorite primate studies, where he took these monkeys, okay, and he put them in 2 separate cages, and he taught these monkeys to do a very specific task. He would give the monkey a cucumber. Both monkeys give them cucumbers. And in return, the monkey would go in its cage and take a rock and give the researcher the rock. Okay, so basically, through operant conditioning, give the rock, get a cucumber. Terrific. So he trained these 2 monkeys in cages next to each other so they could see each other. And then he gives one of these monkeys, in return for the rock, he gives one monkey a grape. And he gives the other monkey, continues to give the other monkey a cucumber, okay? This monkey that was very happy getting the cucumber just a second ago, when he sees that the other monkey gets the grape, goes crazy. He starts shaking his cage. He starts screaming. He bares his teeth. He yells. He throws the cucumber at the researcher because he's so upset. And this explains so much about human behavior, right? We can be so perfectly happy with our life, but if the other guy gets more, well, I don't want to be the flyout, right? I gotta get as much as they're getting. And of course, it's completely senseless, right? It doesn't make any logical sense.
For peak performers, it really happens a lot. And we have envy and we have jealousy, and one is better and one is worse. And it's also it's a strong driving force in our lives, because sometimes when we see, for example, for startup who just begins, he goes to do the market analysis, the competitive analysis, and then you see the other startups, you see the other solutions, you understand what works, what doesn't work, and you learn from it. And this is amazing. This is a really good way to begin. But later on, when you allow it to confuse yourself, to really get into you, this is when it's really, really bad. And it's amazing to see founders, serial founders, in the second, in the third time, they already have millions in the bank, and this voice is still present in their mind. And it's really amazing to see. And maybe my call from here is how we can try and eliminate it a little bit, to mute it a little bit, not completely, just a little bit, and to be more satisfied and happier with what we have. Because I think this is one of the keys, to live life fully, just to see what we have and to grow from it. So what are you doing these days in Singapore?
So I've lived here for about 3 years. We just love it out here. We just really enjoy it out here. Actually, many aspects of Singapore remind me of Israel. Small country surrounded by hostile neighbors. Everybody kind of knows, 1 degree of separation from everyone else. Very family friendly, hot. so there's actually a lot in common. By the way, the Singaporeans love Israelis. I don't know if you know the history with Singapore and Israel, that when Singapore was founded in 1965, the president Lee Kuan Yew invited the Israeli, many aspects of Israeli government to come to Singapore to teach him how to build this country. So they have mandatory military service, just like Israel. There's a lot of things that are a lot of aspects of Singapore are similar, and they actually quite revere Israelis. So I'm very happy here.
That's great. And always, exploring the world and see other opportunities. It's always there. I'm going to ask you a question only if you want to elaborate. You mentioned in the beginning of the conversation about you dealing with obese while you were a child.
Mm-hmm.
How did it actually reflect later on in your course of life?
Yeah, so I used to be clinically obese, not just chubby, but actually morbidly obese. I remember I went to my parents took me to the doctor at one point in my life, and they had this chart on the wall that had okay, here's the green area, this is normal weight. Here's the orange area, that's overweight. Here's you're in this red zone of obese. And that was tough. That was tough because I was always the kid. We had this community pool where I grew up. It was like a condominium complex, and there was lots and lots of buildings and one pool for the complex. And I remember I was always the kid that went to the pool with his shirt on because I didn't want to take off my shirt and show everybody my rolls. And so I struggle with that. But I think it really helped me because one, I remember going through this process of first blaming the food. Right? Like blaming McDonald's and blaming the fast food companies for making me fat. But then, I went to counseling at one point. We also had some family difficulties at that part of my life. And then I started to realize that the reason I was obese wasn't because food tasted delicious. I was obese because I was using food to deal with my emotions. I was eating when I was bored. I was eating when I was lonely. I was eating when I felt ashamed about how much I had just eaten. And it wasn't until I got into those feelings and figured out how to deal with those feelings in a healthy manner that I could finally get control of my weight. And it's still something I struggle with, right? My tendency today, if I'm feeling sad or tired or stressed or anxious, I love eating. It's a great way to eat your problems away. But of course, that's ultimately not very healthy and doesn't actually deal with the deeper problems. And that's exactly the same insight that I carried forward in terms of my relationship with distraction. And it's something I still struggle with. I wrote the book Indistractable. Let me tell you, I still get distracted from time to time, because becoming indistractable doesn't mean you never get distracted. It means you know what to do when you get distracted. So Paulo Coelho has a wonderful quote. He said, "A mistake repeated more than once is a decision." I'll say it again. A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. So distractible people are making a decision to keep getting distracted by the same things. How many times can you be distracted by the same thing again and again and again? Okay, we know the internet's distracting. We know food is delicious. Got it. But what are you going to do about it to not continue to be distracted by the same thing again and again? An indistractable person says, okay, you got me once, but I'm not going to let you get me again. I know what to do today to prevent getting distracted tomorrow. So I think that experience really helped shape my outlook as remembering that we have agency. I think there's a lot of people today that like this idea that there's nothing we can do, right? That the world is addicting us, that all these things are hijacking our brains. And it's just not true. There's a lot we can do, that we do have a lot of personal agency if we believe we do. The worst thing you can do is to give up, is to believe, oh, there's nothing I can do, because then what do? Nothing, right? It's called learned helplessness. And so I think that taught me a lot of that I do have agency, that I do have power, that I can shape my future.
So first of all, thank you for sharing it with us. And I want to reflect three things. I hope I'm going to remember them all. First of all, it was very vivid to listen to you, and the way that you mentioned that you went to the doctor and it was the orange and the green and the red, and you were in the red. And when I was listening to you, I really felt that this is like the time boxing in the calendar. We put this in this color and this color and this color in order. Thanks to our prioritization and how we see things, and I think the way that you've described it, I'm not sure if you thought about it in the past or not, or in a halfway, but this is actually really your why, how you got to what you're doing today, from understanding how not to compensate on our emotions, on our choices with other things, rather than addressing exactly what we want to address and prioritize it into the right place. So this is one thing. And it's really beautiful I really like to see those journeys, how people take their inner thing, their why, and later on make amazing things from it. The second thing that you mentioned is even the fact that we're aware of what's going on. We always hold this gap between knowing and between really acting this way. And I think this is the amazing and also the frustrating work of being humans, all the time, to refine this gap, to make it a little bit smaller, to know that this is what's going on, but still to try to minimize it and to learn from it. And the third thing that I think that is going through all around our conversation is the sense of responsibility. At the end, if we want to lose weight, if we want to be more productive or effective, if we want to make a startup, if we want to make an investment, if we want to bring children to the world, whatever the goal may be, it's but it's a lot of the sense of inner responsibility and commitment to those things that will help us to achieve it and to get there. And it's nothing that someone else external will give us. It's only something that we need to learn how to nurture from ourselves, from the inside. And it's growing all the time, but it's a muscle. It's a muscle of inner commitment and responsibility, and that we all the time needs to take care of. And that's like the thoughts that I had from what you just said.
Absolutely. I don't want to minimize that there is the other side, right? That for sure products are designed to persuade. And I think that's probably another part of my childhood experience. Every Jew, certainly every Israeli, has this trauma, this collective trauma of the Holocaust. And so I think knowing, I was fascinated. I think that many people are fascinated by how so many people could do something so evil. That it wasn't, the Holocaust didn't happen because of Hitler. He didn't kill anybody. It happened because of this mass persuasion of people to, what's that?
That went after him.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But he sparked something that was already there, right? Anti-Semitism didn't start with Hitler. But I think what always fascinated me about that was how people were manipulated and persuaded to do things that, of course, turned out to be incredibly evil. I don't think those people were evil. I think what they did was very evil. These were, and I promise you today, if certain people are put in certain situations, they will also, everybody thinks, oh, if I was a Nazi, no way I would have killed people. No, you under those circumstances probably would have done the exact same thing. Most people did. With very, very few exceptions. So that also fascinated me. And so that's part of my research as well, is how do I study products and how products persuade, but especially when it comes to social media products, right? Products that disseminate information. It's very interesting to me how products are designed, and they're never neutral, right? Technology is not neutral. It's called affordances. If I have a cup, and there's a handle here, well, that's built for me to pick it up a certain way. It's an affordance. And so all technology has these affordances. It's not neutral, but also technology continues to evolve. And so I think the solution, what many people say is, oh, look, technology was used to do something evil, therefore the technology is evil. Let's destroy that technology. And I think that's never the solution. Or very rarely is it the solution. The right solution is to build better technology to replace the old generation of technology, right? It's as Paul Virilio said. He said
that requires great leaders that will have this sense of responsibility and understanding that what they create with the use of TikTok or Instagram or all the other platforms that we have today can really get to the masses, and how we can try and direct it into the good directions that will help society, help climate things, help everything that we need on this planet. And I think that this is, again, goes back to the responsibility of us as thought leaders, as leaders, as startup founders, to really try to take things to this direction.
Yeah, and to build the future we want, right? To literally build it with our own two hands, to build these products. That's why I'm so excited to be in the entrepreneurial community and to help startup founders, because that's the answer, right? So Paul Virilio has this wonderful quote. He said, "When you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck." Mm-hmm. So there's almost every technology has downsides. So you don't stop using that technology per se. You make the technology better. So we didn't stop sailing ships. That's not why we have fewer shipwrecks. We sail more than ever. We made ships better. And so that's why I do what I do. I want to help entrepreneurs make the world better by fixing the last generation of technology with better technology.
So that's amazing. And I think that with this beautiful message, we're going to hit a pause soon, because really we can speak about so many things, but I like to keep it, accurate around the key things. So first of all, Nir, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing all your wisdom and insights. And it's like going from one topic to another, but we're both very associative. And I think that this is beautiful, like to see how our mind map is going from one thing to another. It was really, really great talking to you today. And for the listeners who may be interested in pitching their ideas or reaching out to you, where can they find you?
Sure. My website is nirandfar.com. So it's spelled like my first name, N-I-R andfar.com. And the books I wrote, the first one is called Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. And the second book is called Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life.
Amazing. So to our lovely listeners, we're going to hit pause until the next episode. It's also something I say to the entrepreneurs in my clinic in between sessions. If you enjoyed listening, I would really appreciate it if you share the podcast with people who you think would derive value for it. Feel free to visit my website at galiblochliran.com and leave there your details if you wish to be updated and learn more about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Also, be sure to follow my podcast, Human Founder, in any of your podcast apps. Nir, thanks again. It was a blast. Let's hit pause. Till next time.
Thank you so much.
The Human Founder Podcast by Gali Bloch-Liran.